let me start with the basics. That's who I am. I'm not going to read to you because I assume that you can do that if you want to. Here's the main thing I wanted you to get. Okay. There's two big things on my bio three big things on my bio that I think you'll care about. Number one, that I was a high school teacher and a middle school teacher. I know what it's like to work at those grade levels. I know what it's like to see those kids interacting with each other on a day-to-day basis and the world that they are up against. I ran a clinic in a public school after my teaching years, and that worked with elementary kids. So weirdly, I have experience of all three levels of public education. I've been at the elementary level, I've been at the middle school level, I've been at the high school level. That's the first thing that I thought you would be interested to know. The second thing is I did all of my clinical research. So what got me through grad school and got me my dissertation and got me my doctorate was I did research on the impact of the digital world. So the impact of social media on analog life. So my dissertation topic was the exploration of digital social media on marriages and committed relationships. So we were looking really closely at how the internet affects our day-to-day lives. So I thought that we've got a lot of stuff to back up the things you're going to hear tonight. But the one that's most important is the one down at the bottom. I'm a dad. I've got two kids. I want what's best for them. I am up against the same things that you are. Okay. So what you are experiencing with your kids, the things that you're worried about, I'm worried about too. The chronic reporting of depression and anxiety symptoms worries me as a father as much as it worries me as a clinician. Okay. So I want you to know that I'm not here tonight to judge your parenting. I'm not here tonight to, judge your kids. We are all in this boat together. You may hear some stuff tonight that is difficult to wrap your brain around or difficult to hear, but I promise we're in this together. All right, so let's get into the content for tonight. When I was asked to do this particular presentation, the picture on the screen is what popped in my head. We're talking about depression and anxiety. And the reason that picture popped into my head is because that's what we want. That's the desire we've got. We have this like nice, calm, quiet picture of this peaceful existence, but it is getting harder and harder and harder for us to pull off. I need you to hear me before we take another step in this conversation. I need you to hear me. You can do the things that are required to get improvement in your family. You are capable of reining in some of the things that have stripped your kid of a healthy adolescent experience. You have more power in this conversation than you think you do. Many times parents talk to me about the problems with their teenagers, and they talk to me as though they are completely helpless in that situation. I know it feels that way. I promise you are not. So we're going to get into it now about what you can do and how you can be active in this conversation. I wanted you to see right out of the gate the difference between these two things. So this is a conversation around depression and anxiety, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about depression and anxiety. I wanted you to see visually in front of you that those two are not the same thing, but there's a reason we always push them together when we're talking about them, okay? On the left, you see all the signs of depression, depressive symptomology. On the right, you see all the signs of anxiety. I want to start by using the appropriate language. Okay, this is your first takeaway for the night, okay? I never use the word depression when I'm talking to teenagers, ever. And the reason I don't do that is because teenagers will absolutely take that word, they'll take that diagnosis, and they will wrap it around themselves like a blanket, and they'll use it as a shield to prevent the outside world from getting in. They will identify themselves through their mental health struggles. I don't use that word with teenagers. So how do you define this thing on the left if you're not going to use the word depression? I oftentimes will use "you're suffering from depressive symptoms." Depressive symptoms can be real. Everything you see in front of you is depressive symptomology or depressive symptoms, but I don't tell a kid you have depression. They will carry that baggage around for the rest of their life. I need them to hear that they are struggling with depressive symptomology. The other reason that I don't use the word depression is because just because a kid is struggling with what you see on the screen does not mean they have a diagnosable disorder. It doesn't mean they have something they need to be medicated for. It doesn't mean that they have some deep-seated issue. Okay, so if you are trying to figure out what is happening in my kid, take a look at the screen in front of you. The symptoms on the left are sign that your kid is exhibiting depressive symptoms. The bubble on the right is signs that your child is exhibiting high anxiety symptoms. The stuff in the middle means you're getting both. All right, why do we talk about these at the same time? If they're different things, why do we always lump them together? The reality is because everything that causes an increase in depression also causes an increase in anxiety and the other way around. Okay, these two things are different, but they rise and they fall together. So when we talk about root causes, the root causes of one can be the root causes of the other. And when we talk about treatments, the treatments will look super similar. All right, they're different experiences. If you struggling with anxiety symptoms does not mean you are struggling with depression symptoms and vice versa. But the treatment, the process for working through it, there's a lot of overlap. Now it's not perfect. It's not all overlap, but there is a lot of overlap. I also want to make sure I've said this. So on the screen in front of you is the only plug you're going to get over the course of the next hour. This is the website for one of my offices in McKinney. So this office is right off of 75. Parents, please hear me for a second. I'm not pressing you for business. I'm not trying to get your kids' business. I don't care if you come to us or not. Here's what I care about. I care about if you are worried about your kid, if you believe that your kid is struggling in a clinical way, please go talk to somebody who has some initials after their name and can help you figure out what you're seeing. You go to our office in McKinney, we can do depression screening, we can do anxiety screening, and you'll have a bunch of people who know what they're looking at, know what they're looking for, and can help you as parents navigate it. Okay, this is the legal disclaimer part. I need you to hear me. Nothing I'm about to tell you is advice for your kid. These are general rules as they apply to depression and anxiety. They are not meant to be construed as advice for you to implement with your child immediately. Okay, I don't know your kid. It's possible that what you're going to see tonight is going to be revolutionary and change the way you guys relate to each other. It's possible that what we're seeing tonight won't be perfect for your kid. Okay, if you have questions or if you feel that your kid is struggling mightily, please do me a favor, ask somebody who can be specifically helpful to your kid. All right, so let's get into the real stuff. Let's get into the stuff you came here for. If you will bear with me, I need like 3 minutes of neurobiology. I say that because that word, some of you just put me down and turned on Netflix when I said neurobiology. Don't tune me out. Adolescent neurobiology is really important. Here's why. Your kid is struggling with everything you see on that screen, whether you know it or not, and whether you like it or not. Okay, your kid is undergoing a massive overhaul in his or her prefrontal cortex. The way the prefrontal cortex works, it dictates all of that higher level cognitive stuff. Okay, so everything you see on the screen, the decision making, the social understanding, the self-awareness, those are all upper level concepts. That's called executive functioning. A lot of these things are called executive functioning. Your kid is struggling with these things because the human brain undergoes two massive changes in the prefrontal cortex. One takes place in those really early years right before elementary school. Okay, so we've got this like preschool age, massive change in the prefrontal cortex. And then we've got another one that happens right around 12 or 13 years old. They hit a developmental stage and the prefrontal cortex gets super mushy and all of that upper level stuff struggles. Okay, here's the point of the slide in front of you. If your kid is struggling with this stuff, it doesn't mean your kid is broken. Your kid may feel like your kid is broken, and you may feel like your kid is broken sometimes. Your kid is not broken. Just because your child is struggling with social understanding or struggling with imagination or struggling with empathy I have parents who talk to me sometimes because their kids seem to have no empathy. It doesn't mean your child is broken. It doesn't mean that they've suffered trauma and they're working their way through it. It can, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It can mean your kid is going through the very normal, very expected biological stages of prefrontal cortex development. We have another word for PFC development. You know what it is? It's adolescence. I say that because I want parents breathe easy. Some of what you're seeing is expected. Your child is a work in progress. Your child is not a final product. Please avoid the temptation of viewing them that way. But here's the thing. The thing is, it's always been like that. You struggled with the same stuff too. I did too. All of us did. The difference is the world around these kids has changed a bit. What they're struggling with hasn't. The world has. So how has the world changed? The world has changed by getting noisier, noisier, and noisier. I debated. I had a true debate about this next question. I debated how to open this presentation. I thought about giving you a bunch of slides in like data. This percentage of kids is struggling with depression and anxiety. And I thought about doing that, but you know what I realized? I realized you're already on a call about depression and anxiety. We agree that there's a problem, right? So I didn't do that. I did want to start here though. Our kids are struggling with mental health in rates we have never seen before in any previous generation. It's largely because of the words you see on the screen in front of you. We are in a very noisy world. It's interesting because in a lot of ways, and teenagers don't like it when I say this, but in a lot of ways, kids today have it easier than any generation has ever had it. Their lives are less challenging than any lives of adolescents have been previously in a lot of ways. Now, that's not true in every capacity, but in a lot of ways, that's true. And yet their rates of mental health struggles have skyrocketed. So what does that tell us? It tells us that there's something deeper going on in the culture that we live in. And here's what I think. I think it's not that our generation of kids is experiencing novel problems. I don't think that's the case. I think in some ways they are, and we'll talk about that, but I don't think that's what's going on. I think a lot of our kids are experiencing the same problems that you and I experienced when we were young. The difference is they're experiencing them in different ways, and largely they're experiencing them in more intense ways. Let me give you some of the basic problems that I encounter as a clinician dealing with kids in today's world. I deal with problems of kids figuring out who they are and where they fit in. You struggled with that too, probably. I deal with kids going through relationship struggles, whether it's romantic relationships or friendship struggles, parent, family struggles. Those are all things that you struggle with as well. I deal with kids who are pushing back on authority centers, and that's a way to create their independence. You did the same thing. We tend to forget that when they're doing it to us. When they're doing it to us, we forget pretty quickly that we did the same stuff. I work with kids dealing with drugs and alcohol. Now, that one's interesting because we dealt with that too. Every generation previously has dealt with that. The drugs and alcohol available to this generation of kids is very unique and it's very novel. They have access to way more intense and way more available drugs than any previous generation had. So that's one of those dividing lines. But ultimately, the problems facing this generation of young people is not fundamentally new. Okay, they're not. We didn't invent new problems. We moved those problems to the internet, and that changed the way they experience them. But the problems are not largely new. They are, however, way more intense. I believe that young people have never been asked to manage this level of intensity before, and I think that's one of the primary reasons that we're seeing an uptick in mental health distress. Okay, let me give you a real short example of what I mean. Every generation of kids has dealt with bullying. Not every generation of kids had to deal with it 24 hours a day. Okay, for those of you on this call who didn't grow up in a social media world, you may remember being bullied. You may remember doing the bullying. I hope that's not the case, but I'm realistic. You may remember being bullied, but my guess would be the bullying stopped when you got home. The bullying stopped when you were in the seclusion of your own bedroom. These kids don't have that experience. The bullying continues online. It follows them 24 hours a day. So again, the problems aren't novel. The intensity of it is. Plus, they're existing. They're growing up in a completely different world than the one that you and I grew up in. And that's what I want to spend the next few minutes talking about. So we're going to spend the next few minutes looking at two different types of root causes for what we're experiencing with our adolescents. One is analog roots. When I say analog roots, here's what I mean. I mean the non-internet roots. Now, there's going to be ties to the internet stuff that we're going to talk about. And I can't talk depression and anxiety and not talk about internet problems. That's absolutely going to have to show up. But I want to start with the non-tech stuff. And the reason I want to start with the non-tech stuff is if I did the tech stuff first, we probably wouldn't get to the analog stuff. So let's take a look at some of those offline reasons that kids are struggling today with anxiety and depression in higher rates than ever before. One of them, oh, hang on. There we go. All right, so here we go. I'm going to put a bunch of stuff up all at once because they all speak to one big thing. These kids survived and went through a pandemic unlike anything we ever experienced in our young lives. It changed the way they interact with the world. It changed the way the world interacts with them. And it changed the way the world around them relates to each other. Okay, I want to pay attention to these first couple of bullet points, okay? We have 14, 15-year-old kids who are growing up in a world where every issue, every event, everything that happens, the adults in their life are arguing with other adults about. It is a hostile climate for a lot of young people because they see the adults around them behaving that way, and they then emulate that behavior in their own personal lives. We've noticed, take a look at bullet point 3, the normalization of extreme patterns of communication. I had a really eye-opening conversation recently. I was working with a high school kid who had been brought to me because he had been making threats of suicidal ideation, okay? He'd been using the phrase, I want to kill myself. That was the phrase that he'd been using with me. We got into the conversation. The first thing we talked about, I asked him why he was there, and he told me, and he said those words. He said, when stuff like this happens, I just want to kill myself. And so I stopped him and I said, when you say that, do you mean you want to die? And the look on his face was like I was from another planet. He was like, no. I just mean I want to kill myself. And watching that exchange with him, he did not understand that when he said the phrase, I just want to kill myself, the adults in his life were taking it literally. They heard him saying he wanted to die. He was not expressing suicidal ideation. He was trying to use big words to convey big emotion. Okay, now how in the world did high school kids get to a stage where they can use threats of suicidal ideation and not mean it literally? That happens kind of a lot. The answer is communication and dialogue in our culture has been getting more extreme by the minute. Folks, our kids pick up on that. They pick up on the fact that we make empty threats. They pick up on the fact that we say really big, extreme things, and then they use really big, extreme language. By and large, in my experience, kids using big language, some of them are using it because they are expressing the true depth of their hurt. Some of them are using that big language because they don't have the words to convey the emotion they're experiencing, so they're just using the biggest words they can come up with. Okay, now, again, disclaimer, if your kid makes those kind of threats, take them seriously. Ask the question I asked, by the way. If your kid makes threats of suicidal ideation, one of the first questions that you should ask is, are you telling me you want to die? I want to pin that question down. See, it's so uncomfortable for parents, right? I know some of you just got really queasy when I just said that. Some of you thought, oh, that sounds awkward. Do I really want to ask my kid that question? I promise you this, you're not going to put thoughts in their head if they're not already there. Okay. But you want to know with as much specificity as possible what is happening inside the mind of your child. So if your child expresses concerns like that, threats like that, please take them seriously and ask directly. But the idea here is we have normalized super extreme language. We've normalized cultural tribalism. Everything in our culture is us versus them. It doesn't matter who us is, and it doesn't matter who them is. Every conversation we have, every cultural issue we have takes this very contentious us versus them tone. Folks, kids hear that stuff. They hear that stuff and it affects them. I say that because I want to start addressing this problem with kids by addressing these problems with us as adults. We need to model better behavior. We need to model better dialogue. We need to model more calm, rational adult conversation. Frankly, we've gotten really bad at that. We've blamed kids for it, but the truth is we need to start with ourselves as adults. Next, all right, I want to point at the one at the bottom, okay? Reduction in real world social experiences. Do you know what's weird about this generation of kids? They talk to human beings less than any generation of adolescent kids ever has. Okay, so some of you on here are, and I can't see the list anymore. I don't know where you went, but some of you on here, I am sure can relate to what I'm about to talk about. You remember being in school, and you remember having to go to like Tower Records to buy a CD. You remember Hastings. You remember the glory of the used CD store. Remember that? Some of you remember waiting in line to see a movie. You remember you remember if you wanted to order a pizza, you had to pick up the phone and talk to the person at the pizza place. Even delivery involved you having to communicate with another human being. All right. If your kids want any of those experiences, they can do all of them without ever interacting with another person. It's all at the touch of their fingers. It's all at the ends of their thumbs. If you want to start addressing issues of social anxiety, which is a huge problem with high school kids, do me a favor. Put your kid in situations where they have to talk to people as often as possible. I have been having my children order their own food at restaurants since they were little bitty. The reason for that is we have to give them the ability to communicate with adults comfortably. Talk to them. Give them the ability to talk to other people. This generation of young people spends less time talking to adults and talking to other humans than any previous generation. All right, couple more slides on this, and then we're going to move forward. Reduction in time spent outdoors. I would love to do a deep dive on what I'm about to tell you. I would love to spend the next hour talking about it, but I won't. There is clinical, medicinal, observational, scientific improvement in depression and anxiety symptoms by just simply being outside, by being in nature, by walking through trees. That is one of the most natural approaches you can take to addressing these types of problems. While you're doing it, take a look at the second bullet point, the reduction in mind wandering and boredom. You know, the crime I think we've committed against our children, we have stripped them of the beauty of being bored. When they're bored, they get the ability to utilize their creativity. They get the ability to mind wander, which is a good thing. It allows them to work through complex problems. It allows them to think through where they are. It allows them to solve problems previously. Mind wandering and boredom are two of the best things you can bring into the life of your child. But technology and our fast-paced schedules have made it to where we've removed all mind wandering and boredom from their schedules. All right, parents, I'm going to talk to you for a second. You've done the same thing to yourselves. You've eliminated your mind wandering. You've eliminated your boredom. You know what I'm guessing? I'm guessing most of you suffer from the same condition that I suffer from, that I have to be aware of. Every minute of your day, there is some kind of stimulus in your face, and it's probably a digital stimulus. Okay, that's why everyone thinks that they're busy. Everyone thinks they don't have any time on their schedule. Everyone thinks I'm overloaded, I'm swamped. That is a cultural problem we're experiencing, not because we're actually overloaded, but because every time we would normally in the past get a chance to breathe or get a chance to slow down, we stick our brains on a digital hamster wheel. Okay, this I know is our normal method for stress reduction. Scrolling, that's our normal method. It keeps your brain moving at a rate that prevents you from truly experiencing mind wandering or boredom. These things lead to things like depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms. All right, I could spend more time on it, but we need to keep moving. Last two bullet points on there are we parents, this generation of parents, and I'm with you. I have two kids. I've done the same thing to them. Our unwillingness to let our kids struggle through learning experiences has created a problem for our kids. They're not as resilient as previous generations. Their resolve is not as high as previous generations. We are helicopter parenting. I'm actually weirdly okay with. You might be surprised to hear that. I think helicopter parenting actually has some clinical benefits. That's the idea that we're hovering with our kids. We're involved in what they do. We're connected to their experiences. I actually weirdly have no problem with that. Where I struggle is lawnmower parenting. What is lawnmower parenting? Snowplow parenting is another phrase for that. But lawnmower parenting is we remove all the obstacles that our kid might experience. We fight their fights for them. We resolve their conflicts for them. We talk to teachers on their behalf. We work things out with other people on their behalf. We've oftentimes, in our desire to prevent them from being in uncomfortable positions, we've robbed them of opportunities to grow and to struggle. You got kids in your house. Where would you rather they struggle? When they're out of your house and the world smacks them in the face? Or would you rather they struggle in your house where you can help support them through that? Well, you can't support them through struggle if you don't let them struggle. And so at times you're going to need to do that. Now, let me be clear. I'm not telling you to disengage. I'm not telling you, they'll be fine. Kids are resilient. What I'm telling you is if your kid is in danger, if your kid's being bullied, or if you believe there is the potential for like massive level embarrassment, then get involved. Get involved and ensure that your kid doesn't experience that. But if we're talking basic stuff, they're struggling in a class, struggling with a friend. If we're talking about stuff that's not of such a deep concern that you're truly worried for their well-being, yeah, give them the ability to work through it. Give them the tools to work through it, but then encourage them to work through it. All right, there's another problem that we have here. The other problem we have here, hang on, I gotta see. So I'm seeing questions about suicidal thoughts and ideation. Okay, we'll get to that one. So let me go back to where we were in the analog roots. So we have a hyper focus on self-esteem, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing. I'm not telling you not to encourage self-esteem with your kids, but I need you to understand the relationship between feelings and choices and actions, okay? Because this is going to help you buffer depression and anxiety in your kid, okay? You can't let feelings drive the vehicle in your life. And that's a weird sentence. I'm a therapist. That's a weird sentence for a therapist. To say that you don't want feelings to drive the vehicle in your life, I know is a weird sentence. But let me explain what I mean. Feelings come on the tail end of our actions and of our thoughts and of our environment. There's a lot of factors that play into what create feelings. But we only notice the feelings and we tend to the feelings when we should or could be tending to the thoughts, tending to the actions, and tending to the environment. We are a generation of parents who praise our kids, and that's awesome. We should be a generation of parents who praise our kids. I love that we do that way better than our parents did. I'm not taking that tool away from you, but I think sometimes we overstate the value in what just self-esteem can do. Okay, let me show you some stats that I think are kind of funny. Statistics and social research show us Having high self-esteem does not cause them to do better at any area of their life. If you simply take a kid who's not performing and you try to make him feel better about himself, you're going to end up with a kid who still doesn't perform but feels better about himself. Okay, that's what the data indicates to us about this. I put a bullet point there, number 3, that it makes me laugh because I can imagine myself as a college freshman doing this. There was a study with college freshmen. And what they did was they took kids who were struggling in school and they gave them just self-esteem work. So they only worked on making them feel better about themselves. And then they took the ones who were measurably improved in self-esteem and they measured their academic performance. What they found is that the kids who did better in self-esteem actually did worse academically, but they felt great about it. Okay, so we had this weird like paradox where kids felt they weren't doing well. We tried to make them feel better, and they still didn't do as well. In fact, they did worse, but they felt better about it. Okay, here's why. The thing that leads to confidence is identifiable, measurable success. Success leads to you feeling good about yourself, not the other way around. Okay, so if you want to build a kid's self-esteem, which we should all be desiring, if you want to build a kid's self-esteem, the way to do that is to help them succeed. Help them build things that they're proud of. Help them solve problems that they're proud of. And then identify those things with praise. Now, here's how we're going to praise our kids, okay? We're going to praise our kids the right way, okay? It sounds really odd to say we're going to praise our kids the right way. There is a right and a wrong way to praise our kid, okay? If we praise our kid by only using the praise, you are so smart, you're so funny, you're so whatever, it's good, that's a good start, but you're leaving out the most important part of that praise. If you tell a kid he's smart, especially if he's a younger kid, follow that up by explaining why you just said that. What did you just observe in that child that made you declare that child smart? You say that your child is sensitive or is compassionate. Those are amazing words to offer a child, but make sure the child knows why you said them. So it might look something like this. I'm really proud of you. You're a very compassionate person. I'm saying that because I just saw the way that you gave half of your food to your little sister, even though she already ate hers and she was mad and you worked it out. It's compassionate of you to see that and to not want her to be sad. Okay, you gave a pathway. You gave the praise, but you gave the pathway. Okay, so if you're going to praise, give a pathway. If you don't, if you only leave it with the praise, you're compassionate and then leave it up to the kid to determine why you just said it, it's statistically pretty highly likely that you're going to end up creating a kid who's just more addicted to praise than they are to actual success. So that's something you want to keep in mind. All right. So let me get in now to the digital roots. This is the one that is my specialty area. This is where I've spent most of my career. But I don't want to spend an hour doing it. So I have a presentation that I've done in the past. I've actually done it with your district before. I did it with your district, I want to say last year. So you may have it recorded. And if you do, then by all means, send it back out. And if you don't, then we can do it again. But here's what that presentation essentially is. It walks you through parenting in this digital age. So what are your kids experiencing, and then how can you get involved? Here's what we see in digital roots. What we see, first of all, is your kids' depressive and anxiety symptoms are going up because they are constantly in a mode called fast switching. Okay, here's what fast switching is. Fast switching is what you think is multitasking. Multitasking is a myth. It's not real. It doesn't exist. Let me explain what that means to you. Your attention is like a laser pointer. Okay, it can only be pointed at one thing at a time. If I'm talking to a person and I pick up my phone, as a lot of us do in conversations, I functionally cannot read a text and listen to you. I know you think you can. All of us adults think we can do this. We measurably are all convinced we're amazing at multitasking. Here's what happens. When you're doing that, you're not actually doing both at the same time. What you're doing, you're switching between the two, and everything you miss with your ears, your brain is substituting what it assumes you missed. So I didn't hear the word and or the or whatever street you were talking about, but my brain, because I missed it, my brain just inserted something in that spot and it assumes that that's what you said. Okay. Multitasking is like trying to split a laser pointer and point it at two things at the same time. That's not the way a laser pointer works. Okay. You can point at one thing at a time. Okay. Your children and my children are growing up in a world where they are fast switching oftentimes from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. And here's what we know about fast switching. Fast switching is directly correlated to anxiety and depressive symptoms. It means the more you do it, the more likely you are to experience anxiety and depressive symptoms. That is not only true for kids, it's true for adults as well, but it's especially true for kids. Okay, so what am I saying? I'm saying that the more time we spend, and I'm going to say we're including your kids, but I don't want to make this exclusively a kid situation. The more time we spend looking at phones and jumping back and forth between the real world and the digital world, screen world, the more time we spend doing that, the more highly likely it is that we're creating the conditions for anxiety and depression. So if you're wanting to reduce those symptoms, pay very careful attention to this. We'll get to some of the what to do here in just a few minutes. All right, next. We are in the pre-seatbelt internet age. We're coming out of it, but we've been in the pre-seatbelt internet age for the last 12, 13 years. That's probably not fair. Probably closer to 20 years. And when I mean the pre-seatbelt age, what I mean is cars were on the road for 60 years before anybody thought to put a seatbelt in them. We kind of had that same experience with the internet. It existed for a huge chunk of time before we started thinking, hey, there may be some dangerous side effects to the amount of time we're spending online. Your kids have grown up in that. The last one is social media. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about that. I am going to simply say this. Here's how we know that social media has been a driver. It's been a driver of depressive and anxiety symptomology. We know that because the rates of teenage anxiety and depression stayed fairly predictable for a long time, for decades. We could project within a pretty safe range. We could project what depression rates and anxiety rates were going to look like in teenagers. And then all of a sudden in 2011, they skyrocketed. Beginning in 2011, and they have not come down. They've continued to rise. So what happened in 2011? Social media hit their phones. That's what changed the experience of adolescent anxiety and adolescent depressive symptomology. Those things skyrocketed when they were given the ability to spend their time online. Now, why is that? I'm only going to show you one slide to explain it, and I'm not going to walk you through everything, but I do want to make a couple of points. First of all, we have data that shows that social media creates feelings of comparison and jealousy in kids as young as 10 years old. We've shown, definitively proven, that social media creates feelings of envy and conflict where it didn't exist previously. They have lower self-efficacy. They don't know who they are, which creates depressive and anxiety symptoms. Bullet point 4 came from a study that shocked me. And what it showed was that kids who are active on social media had a 40% less likely chance to confide in an adult when they struggled, or even in another human being, another kid. The one at the bottom is the one that I think summarizes it the most. That's why it's last. When kids spend time in the digital world, they report a lower life satisfaction and a heightened envy. All right. So let's breathe for just a second. I just laid out in probably 20, 25 minutes, I just laid out a whole bunch of problems that I know are scary. And I know they're scary because I'm experiencing them just like you are. So what do? We're going to spend these last few minutes talking about what to do. And then I'm going to start trying to address your questions as best I can. Right out of the gate, I want you to stop focusing on solely relieving symptoms. Okay, here's what that means. That means that if your kid is demonstrating the symptoms that you saw on the screen, that very first slide where we saw depression on one side and anxiety on the other, if you're seeing those symptoms, Those symptoms should be a sign that there's a deeper problem, but addressing only the symptoms is not enough to resolve the problem. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. If your child feels sad and you decide that you want to address that by taking your child shopping to distract them from their sadness, that may work temporarily. And if what they're sad about is something small level, day-to-day normal kid type stuff that they've experienced before, and they have kind of a well of knowledge on how to deal with it, if that's what the problem is we're talking about, then you may be fine taking them shopping. However, if your kid is struggling with true depressive or anxiety symptoms, taking them shopping might make them feel decent temporarily. You may see a short-term reduction in symptoms, but when they get home and the shopping's over, that crash is going to hit, and those symptoms aren't just coming back, they're coming back harder than they were before. Okay, so we have to stop focusing solely on relieving symptoms, and we have to start focusing more intentionally on actually resolving the problems that we're seeing. So how do we do that? The next thing I need you to do, parents, I need you to connect with your child and not correct your child when it comes to these symptoms. Okay, so if you're seeing depressive or anxiety symptoms, we get really frustrated. I don't mean to stereotype, so I apologize if I do, but dads, we are terrible at this. We don't want our kids to feel bad. We don't want our kids to be sad or to be lonely or to be hurt or to be wounded or to be any of the things that they oftentimes are. And our reaction to it is to scold them out of it, to tell them, what do you got to be sad about? What's the problem? Why are you so mopey all the time? We say things like that. We're trying to correct our kids' depressive symptoms. I need you instead to connect. So let me tell you what that might look like. If you see some of those symptoms that we looked at on that first slide, instead of telling your kid not to do it, which doesn't help at all, instead ask your kid, hey, I'm seeing something. Here's what I'm noticing. Here's what it looks like to me. Tell me about it. Something going on? What's happening in your life? What's happening in your world? How is your day today? And don't accept fine. How you feeling about your friends right now? Let me tell you a sentence that I would love for every parent to use more frequently with their kids. Did anything bad happen today? You know what we do sometimes? It's an accident. It's well-intentioned. But sometimes when our kids have not been with us, we only ask them positively slanted questions. Did you have a good day? Tell me something fun you did today. What did you like about this? We ask these positively slanted questions. The problem with that is that if a kid has a problem, if a kid has a traumatic event, if a kid experiences something negative, something hurtful, something that they need to express, we don't open the door for that conversation. So we now put it on the kid to come to us and find the language to do that. Well, I hope your kid can do that, but most of them can't. I have asked my children that some variation of that question every time they have been away from me since they were little kids. The question is, did anything bad happen? Or did anybody do anything you didn't like? Or that's for little kids. If you ask a 17-year-old that question, you're going to get a weird look. But if you have a younger kid in particular, anything happened that made you feel uncomfortable? Did anything happen that you didn't like? But with your high school kids, asking them questions about the negative experiences in their life is just as important as asking them questions about the positive things in their life. Don't be afraid to ask them, is anything going on in your life right now that's hurting you? Because I'm noticing something different. There's been a change. And when you notice that change, here's what connecting looks like instead of correcting. Connecting means, here's what I'm seeing. Help me understand what's going on. Because it is entirely possible what you're seeing is you misunderstanding something. And you want your kid to be in a position where they can explain to you, no, I'm sorry, I'm fine. I've been busy. I had some stuff on my mind. I'm good. There's nothing going on. Everything's fine. You simply asking those questions, you simply crying a bit, for lack of a less aggressive phrase, can be that connection piece we're talking about. Okay, what else can we do? You can help enhance and emphasize stabilizing factors in a kid's life. Here's what a stabilizing factor looks like. Anchoring relationships. I don't want to oversimplify, and I do want to point something out. I am a relationship counselor, so I believe in relationship systems. I believe in family systems. I believe that I don't believe that we're intended to be lone wolves. I believe we are pack animals. And so we all need anchoring relationships. When your kid struggles, especially when your kid struggles with depressive symptoms, bringing them back to anchoring relationships and helping them spend time in those anchoring relationships is one of the most important things you can do. Okay, now why do I keep using the word anchoring relationships instead of just relationships? Because to them, a high school friend is a relationship. That's not who I'm talking about. Okay, I don't mean that they don't have real friends. I do mean that by their very nature, adolescent relationships tend to be unstable. They tend to not be long-term committed relationships and friendships where you know each other inside and out. Now, hopefully kids do have some of that. If your kid has friends that he or she has had since they were in second grade or since they were 4, by all means, that's an anchoring relationship and lean into that. But when your kid struggles, bringing them back, identifying those anchoring relationships and trying to encourage those anchoring relationships can be one of the best things that you can do for your kid. Also, connecting to community. So here's my cultural observation. Over the last couple of years, we've really lost the idea of anchoring to community, of connecting to community. I don't know what that looks like for you. I'm not going to give you advice on how to connect to community. I don't even know how you define community. Here's what I know. I know that your kid needs to be connected to people outside of the people just in your home. And your kid needs to be connected to people that they feel a sense of community with. Okay, now again, however that looks for your family is fine. I'm not going to give even examples. I am going to tell you that if when we're done with this call, one of the best things you can do by with your family is to hang up and ask yourself, who's our community? Say it out loud. Who's our community? And then whoever that community is, consider that as a part of reconnecting your kid to their mental health. The last one on this screen is one that's true for everybody, but it's really true for kids. So part of the neurobiology of adolescents is their brains have something called a dopamine pathway. That dopamine pathway is really wide. It's wider than it is for you, which means they have more emotional experiences than you. I know that sounds crazy. I know nobody here is shocked to hear me say that. They have more deeply emotional experiences than you or I because the pathways in their brain are actually chemically set up for that. So like they have deeper, they feel things more than you and I can feel things. I say that because giving them something to believe in, specifically giving them opportunities to give of themselves in a way that tangibly benefits someone else, can be game-changing for your kid. I dealt with a young person. Now, this was a person in her 20s, but I dealt with a young person not that long ago who years of these types of symptoms. Through the course of our conversation, we really dug in on that one. We dug in on the idea of giving to something that you believe in, something tangibly that benefits somebody else. This person found an organization that did therapy dogs in hospitals, and she was able to go through the training and go through all the process involved. And part of her weekend was spent taking small dogs into the rooms of terminally ill and critically ill children to play with the therapy dogs. It was better than any prescription that we could have written. It was the benefit. And the weird thing was she wasn't the focal point. The dog was the focal point. But being involved in something like that and being able to give back in a way that was tangible, a way that she could see, revolutionized how she felt about herself, about her symptomology, and it gave her something that you can't get by looking internally. So I don't want to hit this bell too loudly because I don't mean to be aggressive, but I will say it as clearly as I can. When we struggle with depression and anxiety, we tend to constantly look internally. We're constantly talking about ourselves and thinking about ourselves and looking at ourselves. Oftentimes, the solution for that is found outside of ourselves and giving outside of ourselves. So consider that as another possibility. Next, unplug often and aggressively. I'm not unplugging right now. I'm taking my shirt off because it's gotten warm. I'm taking my outer shirt off. Some of you weren't looking at the screen and now you are because you heard me say that. I'm taking my button down shirt off because it got hot in my office. Where was I? Unplug often and aggressively. So you know what I want on your calendar? Here's my challenge to all of you listening to my voice. Here's your challenge to deal with both depression and anxiety in your family and with your child. I want you to put on your schedule tech-free weekends. Once every couple of months. Doesn't have to be all the time, but a weekend where you're going to shut everything down on Friday and you're not going to turn it back on until Sunday night. And be together as a family and spend time together as a family. All right, I'm looking at what time it is. Let's get through a couple more things and then we'll get to some questions. I want you to explore meditation and mindfulness. Let me talk about anxiety for 1 second as it relates to mindfulness. Mindfulness is, you can Google search mindfulness techniques or mindfulness for anxiety, mindfulness for depression. You can get, it's all over the therapeutic space. So you'll get a bunch of different guidance. Mindfulness is basically bringing you to the here and now. It's trying to make you present in the here and now. So here's the weird thing about anxiety. Ready? Anxiety cannot exist if you are focused on the here and now. Why is that? Anxiety is rooted in either a perceived future or a perceived past. It's worry about the future or it's worry about the past. Anxiety can't exist in this present moment because in this present moment, the only thing I have to deal with is what I can see. It's a weird way to consider it, but anxiety doesn't exist right now. As a result of that, mindfulness is one of the most powerful techniques when it comes to anxiety reduction, and kids are really good at it. Their brain pliability, specifically their prefrontal cortex pliability, makes it to where when you introduce mindfulness techniques or meditation techniques, it has an impact on them that it doesn't have on us, and it's really powerful. One of my favorite meditation techniques, especially with kids, it covers a whole bunch of ground all at the same time, okay? So if you've been kind of checked out, I don't know, I can't see you, I don't know what you're doing. I assume some of you probably are multitasking and you're mad at me because I told you you're not actually multitasking. Whatever you're doing, stop for a second if your kid is struggling with anxiety. When it comes to holistic, non-medical interventions for anxiety and depression, one of my favorite activities is a type of meditation that does the opposite of what traditional meditation does. So traditional meditation, you tend to think of clear your mind. I don't know if any of you are ADHD like I am, but clearing my mind is an impossible task, ain't happening. But you know what I can do? I can give myself mental free play. And that's what I call this type of meditative technique. It's called mental free play. I don't know what you're going to find if you Google that because I just kind of made it up off the top of my head. The way I've used it, though, with kids in the past is I want you to imagine, take your 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, find a comfortable chair. You don't have to do incense or music or any of the things that you might traditionally associate with meditation. Doesn't have to be a completely quiet room, although when you're first doing it, quiet really helps. What I want you to do is I want you to you don't even have to close your eyes, although again, it does help. I want you to, instead of trying to clear your mind, I want you to set your mind free. What I mean by that is think about whatever your brain thinks about. Don't try to stop it. The one thing I'm going to ask is don't engage with the thought. So here's the mental picture of what this technique looks like. If you can imagine like laying in the grass and watching clouds roll past you, that's what you're doing with your thoughts. You can't reach up and pull it down. You just watch it pass. So here's how that looks. If I let my mind wander today, right now, if I start letting my mind wander, I might be tempted to think, oh, I got a trip tomorrow. I got to leave town tomorrow. Okay, do I have my bag packed? Do I know where I'm going? Do I know what time I'm supposed to be places? Okay, that's what we don't want. When the thought pops into my head, I'm leaving town tomorrow. My job with this meditative technique, my job is to say, okay, I just thought about leaving town tomorrow, and then let it go. So you're trying to kind of note, you're an observer of your own thoughts. Okay, now the reason that that's a really super valuable technique for depression symptomology is because by and large, that mind wandering gives them the ability to understand what's going on in their brain, the ability to understand their thoughts. And then once they've done that, they can bring it back to you. Okay, as their counselor, I will assign kids to do exactly this and then come back to me and talk to me about the thoughts that they saw. And it's crazy how much their vocabulary has expanded by simply watching thoughts and giving themselves mental free play. Remember that whole mind wandering thing we talked about? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. All right, which actually brings me to my next slide. Increased time in nature. I told you there's a therapeutic effect to that. Increased mind wandering. You can do that at the same time as in nature. And then here's another big one. Help them create something. Help them create literally anything. If they like to draw or paint, then let it be a drawing or a painting. If they like music, let them create a song. I don't care. Let them write, let them build. So I don't care what they create. But I should be able to ask any kid that I interact with, tell me something you've created in the last year. And they should have an answer to that question. And that answer should, if it's being done well, that answer should be something outside of something they were assigned at school. Why is that? Because I want them to be in charge of that creation. So help them create something, help them create literally anything. All right, I've got, just stay with me here. I got like a couple more suggestions, and then I'm going to get to all these questions or all the questions that you have. I want you to talk about different things. So there's a screenshot of on Amazon, something called Table Topics. As a disclaimer, I have no tie to this company. I don't even know who the company is. I'm not getting paid for this, but I really like their product. In fact, there's one on my desk somewhere. My kids were here earlier and we had these out because we had dinner in my office. Table Topics sits on our kitchen table. Those of you, one or two of you may know me because I've got friends in your district. If you know me, you know I could talk to a wall and not only have a good conversation, but probably learn a thing or two. I don't struggle for conversation. However, with my kids and with my wife, I don't want to talk about our day all the time. I don't want to talk about our to-do lists all the time. I don't want to talk about school all the time. I want to talk about other things. Table Topics allows us to do that. We put that in the center of the table, and then our kids will pull cards out and we'll talk through them and we'll ask each other questions. I know it sounds weird. You're going to learn more about their world, learn more about their experiences, and open the door to deeper dialogue by doing this than you will by sitting them down and forcing them to talk to you about their feelings. If you have not had basic in-depth conversation about things other than their feelings, really hard to have in-depth conversations with them about their feelings. Okay, so that's a really good intervention for parents. Here's another one. Talk about their anxiety. Say it out loud. You know how you can lead into it? And here's something I believe wholly and completely. Anxiety is a good thing. Okay, it sounds weird because we think it's a bad thing. Anxiety is a good thing. Out of control anxiety is a bad thing, but anxiety is a good thing. Show me someone with no anxiety, and I will show you someone with no future. Anxiety is a good thing. Anxiety is what drives us to improve our lives. It's what drives us to succeed at things. It's what drives relationships to succeed, is the anxiety of losing things. That's not bad. We don't want to pathologize the experience of anxiety. We do, however, want to help them understand that if it gets control of you, if it's anxiety over things that are completely out of your power and control, if it's anxiety that cripples you, well, that's bad. But anxiety itself is not a bad thing. So here's how we can help them anxiety prep. So if I know anxiety is not a bad thing, but we want to figure out how to make it work for us, here's a way to do that. Now, again, I'm going to send you this PDF so you've got it. Here's an anxiety prep sheet. We use this, for the record, with high school kids as well as we use it with elementary kids. So if I know I'm going into a situation where anxiety may be a part of it, what's the situation I'm going into? Why might I get anxious? How have I handled it before? What can I say or do to prepare? How will I know I'm getting anxious? And then what coping skills should I use? If you're dealing like clinically with a kid, we'll literally use this piece of paper. But if you're a parent, this is a conversation that allows your kid to walk into a situation that could potentially be high anxiety and not feel like it's super high anxiety. All right, let me give you just two more, and then we'll call it a night. Talk about goals, goal setting. I know this is going to sound boring and it's almost going to sound a little cliche, but stay with me. Setting goals with your kid can help with anxiety reduction because it allows them the ability to see themselves succeed, which raises their confidence, which raises their ability to relate to the world, which lowers their depression symptoms and their anxiety symptoms. The sheet you see in front of you is one of the ways in which we help teach goals. Where I see us making the biggest problem as it relates to goal setting, we tend to think too big. We say, what are the goals? And we put college on the list, and we put a good job when you're 30. Those are great. I just keep talking about those. I'm not taking them away. But maybe let's start with this week. What are their goals for today? What are their goals for this week? Helping your kids work through actual, tangible, functional goals. Folks, you want to help your kids, coach them. I was a basketball coach for a long time. I played basketball my entire life. When I had a kid who didn't know how to dribble, you know what I didn't do? I didn't make him do push-ups. It didn't make any sense. Why would I do that? If a kid doesn't know how to shoot free throws, I didn't run him. If a kid didn't know how to shoot free throws, we worked on shooting free throws. If a kid didn't know how to dribble, we worked on dribbling. But as parents, when our kids struggle internally, we tend to just punish them. We put boundaries up and we punish in ways that aren't helpful. We have the right intentions. We want our kids to feel better, but we can't legislate their feelings. What we can do is we can do everything possible to coach them through the experience of being young in a difficult situation, which actually brings me to my last couple of slides. Coach the emotions that you can. Again, I don't want you to feel like I'm attacking you, but most of the kids who I have worked with who are high anxiety have at least one parent who is high anxiety. And those kids have taken an awful lot of lessons from that parent who is high anxiety. Again, I don't know you. Maybe that doesn't apply to you. I feel like there's people watching this. Somebody just looked at somebody who was in the room with them and was like, see, that's you. I'm not trying to point fingers. What I am telling you is that as parents, you want to help your kids with depression and anxiety. One of the first things we can do is model emotional rationing, model emotional control, model openness. If you need to know, or if you do, not if, you do need to know whether your child needs counseling. You need to know whether your kid needs to go somewhere where they can talk through their feelings on a deeper level. And you won't know that if your kid doesn't have the ability to talk about emotions on a deeper level. And your kid is going to develop that ability by doing it with you. So we have to get our own anxiety in check. We have to get our own symptomology in check in order to make it possible for our kids to talk to us about theirs. And we do that by being present with them. So I want you to be present with your kids. The last thing is you can plan for technology. I have a website. It's yourbestfamily.com. I mean this when I say it. I'm not using you for business purposes. Everything on that website is free. There's something called a family technology plan. I actually uploaded it. I updated it today. It's been on the website for 10 years, but I updated it today with a kind of a different model of it. The family tech plan is meant to help you and your family be proactive with your technology instead of reactive. So do stuff like that, and I think you're going to make a lot more progress. All right, I'm going to close this thing out, and then I'm going to get to your questions. I did not talk about a lot of the clinical stuff that you probably expected me to talk about in this conversation. I am not here to advocate for a specific approach to depressive symptomology. I didn't talk about the medical approach, because if you feel that that is appropriate for your kid, or if you feel that your kid needs to be medically evaluated, then please take them to be medically evaluated. Okay. What I was trying to help you understand was that we have this odd situation where kids look different now than they ever have. And we as parents are generally judgmental about that. And we just want to fix the broken thing in the kid. And we don't want to consider the environment. We don't want to consider the external stuff, the family stuff, the relational stuff, the digital stuff. That feels too complicated for us. We just want to stop the thing that's happening inside our kid. Folks, I'm with you. I have children. This is hard, but we have to be more intentional as parents about getting into these complicated areas and recognizing that you don't know how to fix these problems. I know you don't, but you know your kid. And if you know your kid, then hopefully your kid will talk to you. And as your kid talks to you together, you then create a situation where you can figure out what you're doing. All right. So that's it for the presentation part. If you need to go, you will not offend me by leaving. So let me look at some of the here we go. Let's look at some of the questions here. First of all, I do see a question of, can we put the different symptoms of anxiety and depression on? Yes. Guys, can I just send you a PDF? Do you have emails for all the people who do you have an email you want them to contact in order to get that PDF?
Yeah, they can send, I've sent the emails out to everybody. So they have my email. So they can, they have mine. You can send it to me and I can send it out or whatever.
Okay, Christy, I will send you the PDF of everything that we just did tonight. As soon as we're done, I'll send you that. And then if you need that, email Christy and she will make sure that you get it. Okay, there was one here. My 13-year-old son was 2 weeks into middle school when he began expressing he had suicidal thoughts and ideation. Okay, inpatient, intrusive thoughts, continued every single day. He's been under the care of Starry Counseling. His main complaint is he needs peer support group. His dad and I asked about resources to find this. You have suggestions of group therapy for teenagers. So this is the part where I'm glad I don't work for your district, because I'm about to talk real honestly. Group therapy for teenagers is really dangerous and hit or miss. I'm going to tell you why. It is really hard for teenagers to sit in a group with other kids experiencing symptomology and them not internalize that same symptomology. What am I saying? What I'm saying is I have run groups with teenagers before, and there is a social component to it. And I say that because wherever you go, please talk to your kid about that. Talk to them about what they're experiencing. Talk to them. It says, you said your 13-year-old son. I would want you to talk to your 13-year-old son about specifically what he's experiencing. And I would want you to encourage him to be sure that in that group setting, that's where he's staying, that he's trying his best. He's trying his best to stick with his experience. I say that because it's real easy for teenagers in groups to become more symptomatic after some of that group exposure. Now, that said, I have a lot of colleagues who would be real mad if they heard me just say that. And they would be mad because they run groups and they've been successful. They can be successful. So please don't hear that as a blanket statement. But I will say that group counseling is not necessarily a fix-all. That said, no, I'm not going to recommend a specific group counseling resource. I will tell you this. The office that I put on the PDF was my private practice. I used to be there a lot, but over the last couple of years, I have found more value to my daily schedule by doing more presentation stuff, and I travel a lot. So I'm not actually in that office all that often, but there is an extensive team of people who know what they're doing. And if you ask that question to our receptionist at New Horizons, any of them will be able to give you resources. So I would strongly encourage you to call. And for the record, some of those resources won't be our office because again, I'm not trying to use this to drum up business. Let's see. Will this be recorded and shareable to participants? Yes. When we first got on this call, I was real clear that I am totally fine with that. If you guys feel like it's valuable, then please share it. All right. See, I saw some Q&A over here. What are the differences between feeling down and depressed? We have a 15-year-old who would tell us occasionally she is depressed. but we don't see any signs of depression or any of the symptoms you described. She has a tendency to compete attention from her two other children. Okay, how can we accurately? Oh, listen. Holy smokes, that is a phenomenal question. And the phenomenal question is, how do I know whether what my kid is telling me is like depression or clinical depression? The answer is, I would not recommend you make that assessment. I would recommend you focus less on the word and focus more on what she's saying. Okay, so she's telling you she's depressed. I don't care whether we call it depressed or sad or whatever else. What I care about is why. So let me give you a sentence that I want you to start using with a kid who tells you they're depressed. The sentence is, help me understand. I'm handing it back to you. Help me understand. So you say you're depressed, help me understand. And then talk as much as you can. If what you're hearing doesn't match up with some of the things that we saw on that slide, then you may be looking at some more holistic stuff, which is what we talked about tonight. If you say that she's competing for attention with a 12 and 16-year-old, that totally makes sense. But the thing is, if she's looking for attention, you know what a great response would be? Give her attention. I don't necessarily mean in a dysfunctional way if that's what she's looking for. But it's funny to me how often kids ask for attention, and our response is, how do I get this kid to stop asking for attention? Usually the answer is, well, we give them more attention. How do I get my kid to stop saying he's hungry? I give him a sandwich. That's usually how I do it. So look, I'm making light of the situation because I do want you to know that there's a lot of things you can try. It is possible that a 15-year-old who is using words like depressed as a way to get attention, it is entirely possible that giving some of that direct attention, try taking her to dinner, just you two, or just the three of you. Try spending some more individual quality time. Try asking a little more about her life and her day. See if that helps. If it doesn't, listen, you may be dealing with a kid who's trying to figure out who she is. And as a result of that, she's using words like depression because she knows that they get a lot of attention and they play into what she's looking for. So if it doesn't stop with some of those organic things, then by all means, you can talk to somebody who can actually take a look at her. Curious how ADHD plays into depression. Substantially. Your daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, but very mild, and it makes me wonder if it's just depression or anxiety. Instead, it absolutely can be. So these things co-mingle, they intermingle a lot. ADHD can present as anxiety, and anxiety can present as ADHD. The things that ADHD and anxiety produce can present as depression. Okay, so we're talking about some complicated, how do we differentiate one from the other? The best answer I can give you for that is screening. Screening tends to do that. But everything we talked about tonight is useful for all three of those diagnoses. The reason, and that's actually why I do it the way I do it. The reason I don't do this the way that a lot of other clinicians do talks like this, everything we talked about are things you can do at home and things that will address all three of those diagnoses. So try that, and then hopefully that makes progress. If not, maybe we need to reassess. How do you stop your 12-year-old playing video games? My son's 11. Okay, it's very hard for him to know to stop himself once he gets started, even if he knows he has time to stop. All right. I'm trying to find a way to answer this question as succinctly as possible. All right, so I have like an hour-long answer. So let me give you the shortest possible answer. Number one, always give a warning. That's in my tech plan. Don't ever walk into a kid's room and say, hey, turn it off. You just walked into an OK Corral situation if you did that. Okay, here's what you do instead. You walk in and say, hey, buddy, 10 minutes. And so they know they've got 10 minutes. You know what else I would like to do? Put the timer where they can see it. Use an iPad. Use something that they can see the countdown. 10 minutes, boom, you hit the 10-minute timer. Once the 10 minutes goes off, you come in and it's time to turn it off. All right. Here's how we create a situation where the kid isn't yelling and screaming at the end. Once that 10-minute timer goes off, I'm not going to yell at you, and I'm not going to like pull the plug, because then I'm going to find myself again in an OK Corral situation. Here's what I'm going to do. tomorrow night, when you start playing video games, for every 1 minute past 10 minutes that you play tonight, I'm going to take 20 minutes off tomorrow night. So so you want to go 5 minutes over? That's your business, but you just, what's 5 times 20? Let's do some math while we're here. So what we've just done is we've handed it back to the kid and we've given you total control of your future. You are now in control. It's not up to me. I'm not your jailer. I don't want to be in that role. What I'd like to do is root you on. And if you want to go 10 minutes over, awesome. That means no time tomorrow night. And this is an easy problem to solve. Okay. What that does is it creates a situation where your kid is now in control. I don't want you as a parent standing over your kid going, I have told you 6 times it is time to turn that game off. If you find yourself doing that, here's a better approach. Okay. I give your kid the opportunity to be in control of that. Are playing cards good for the kids? Yes, please. Exploding Kittens, awesome. Have a great time, man. We bring Uno to dinner. When we go out to dinner, we bring Uno cards and we will sit around and stuff gets intense. You drop a draw 5 on mom, you're going to have some problems. So cards with kids are fantastic. Does self-esteem lead to depression and or anxiety? Yes. I struggle because it depends on how you define depression and anxiety. If you're talking about like the clinical definition that most of my colleagues would want us to use, then no, but yes. So here's what I mean. I remember what we said when we started this conversation. I don't use the word depression with teenagers. I don't tell them that they are depressed or that they are suffering from depression. Instead, I tell them they are experiencing depressive symptoms. Does self-esteem lead to that? Yes. Does low self-esteem lead to that? Yes. Does high self-esteem lead to that? Yes. So here's what's weird. There's something, and I actually had a slide for this and I took it off because I thought it would take too much time, he says at 7:50. There's something called the curvilinear model of self-esteem. You know what we found? We find that at really low levels and really high levels, depression and anxiety is prevalent. So like you want to I want my kid to be like confident, but not so confident that he gets himself into situations that he can't manage, or so confident that he's afraid to fail. I don't know if any of you have GT kids. If your kid is struggling with depression and anxiety, I bet I got a bunch of you whose kids are really smart. You know what's weird? As you go up the IQ scale, you go up the mental health struggle scale. So I hate that that's true. I'm sorry for all of you parents of super smart kids who are very despondent and sad all the time. But it's true. I specialize in that work. In fact, this past Monday, I spent the entire day with the counseling department of McKinney ISD. And I did an entire day-long training on therapeutic interventions with the gifted and talented. And you know the thing that I encourage them to do? Gifted and talented, smart kids think they're weird. My response is yes, they are. And I tell them that. And then I tell them how awesome it is, how amazing it is, how their weirdness, and I put that in quotes, their weirdness is their gifting. It makes them awesome, but it makes them feel different, and it creates depression and it creates anxiety. So if you've got a kid who feels weird, sometimes it's okay to say, well, buddy, you feel weird because you're kind of different. And it's the best kind of different. I wouldn't change you for anything in the world. Help your kid lean into that and lean into the fact that, yeah, I don't fit in this particular environment, and that's okay. Is it okay to set a time limit with our 12-year-old song? Okay, I'm gonna read this, and then I'm gonna answer it like this be the most direct I can answer it. Is it okay to set a time limit with our 12-year-old son on how long to be on electronics? Yes. It's not only okay, it's required. We talked with our son ahead before giving him a laptop. He usually runs over. We would give him a reminder once or twice. He still doesn't stop. He would just shut down his internet. Are we being too strict? No, you're being exactly the type of parent you should be. Your children should not be it's not Wild West on the internet, please. When we're talking about setting time limits for kids on electronic devices, that is a wonderful thing for you to do. Use the conversation we just had. How do we limit that time? For every minute over, there's a consequence. And that consequence is usually they've lost time somewhere else. And not 1 minute, they've lost 10 minutes somewhere else. Make it to where they want to shut it down on time, because the consequences of not shutting it down on time are things they don't want. Okay, that allows you to step back and not hound them and constantly keep saying, okay, I told you, it's time to get off. It's time to get off. If you're badgering your kid, we're in a bad situation. Should we be blocking certain sites on social media? Should we be blocking certain social media sites from teenagers? Yes, all of them. So what social media sites are appropriate for teenagers? My clinical answer is none of them. What is the appropriate age for teenagers to get on social media? 43. That's my answer. All right. I'm going to guess none of you are going to do that. So yes, should we be blocking certain sites? I'm going to tell you what the data tells us. Girls and Instagram is a problem. There is a rash, and we have not talked about this as much as we should have publicly. And if we want to do this together, I would love to be your guide on this journey, despite the fact that there's a pretty important factor that I don't possess. We are in the midst of a crisis of body image and eating disorder issues among adolescent girls. There is a direct tie to their Instagram usage and the prevalence of those diagnoses. So yes, but the thing is, they're all on Instagram. So if you try to take that one away, you're going to have a really intense conversation about why. I will point out to you, your kid is going to say, but everybody else does it. And I want to remind all of us that didn't work on our parents. I don't know why it's working on us. When I went home and said that to my parents, they weren't like, you make a good point. We don't want to, yeah, you're right. So I don't know why that works on us so well. But should we be blocking certain sites? Let me make this as simple as I can make it. Instagram leads to body image issues. For the record, in boys too, that's not exclusive to your girls. It leads to body image and comparison issues. Twitter is basically the place where everyone hates each other and is angry all the time. A lot of the other kids-specific social media is the same as you would find anywhere where they don't think adults are, which is, yes, there's aggressive dialogue and aggressive conversation. If your kids are under the age of 16, I would want a lot of control. I would encourage you to try and take a lot of control. So on my website, I put something called the Family Tech Plan. There's a blank one, and then there's an example. On the example page, one of the things that I put on there, is that it is an expectation that is said out loud in our family. No phone is private. Any phone can be picked up and gone through. Ooh, people get real uncomfortable when I say that. I will stand by it. And if you want to fight me on it, I absolutely would be happy to explain why I feel so strongly about it. But if you can set that precedent early, it's really helpful. If your kid's over 16 and you haven't been setting that precedent, I would have a really personal and intense conversation about their experience with social media. Here's what I mean. I wouldn't necessarily ask them, I wouldn't lead off with personal questions about their usage. I would lead off with questions about their feelings. So in other words, how do you feel when you close Instagram? We've done that test with kids. How do you feel after when you close down certain apps? That's a really powerful conversation to have because it gives them the ability to evaluate how they're feeling and then to start recognizing, I don't feel very good when I get off Instagram. None of them do, by the way. When we do that assessment with kids, when they close Instagram, they don't feel good. They feel bad. Well, ask them, how do you feel when you close down an app? As soon as you close it down, ask yourself, how am I feeling? That can be an entry point into a conversation. All right, I did not fully understand the self-esteem portion during the presentation. How can you help the child to be in the middle range, not in the extreme high or in the extreme low self-esteem situation? Okay, go back and look at the PDF because here's what I wanted you to get. The way that you help a kid get in the middle is by praising and then telling them how they got there. Because if they see their track record of success and they understand how they acquired that praise, you're giving them the ability to get back to it. And here's the weird thing that happens. We didn't really talk about this, but here's the weird thing that happens. When they know how they earned praise, they also know the pathway that they got there. They made choices and they've messed it up before. And so it really tends to land them in the middle. You want a kid who is overly confident and is in that dangerously high area, then blindly praise all the time and never hold them accountable for their behavior. If every time your kid gets in trouble, it's the school's fault. Every time your kid gets in trouble, it's the coach's fault. It's another kid's fault. If that's our approach as parents, we're creating kids who are going to be in that irrationally high version of self-esteem. If every time they get in trouble, we berate them for it and we belittle them for it, that's going to put them in that low category. So how do we hit the one in the middle? We recognize that they make mistakes, but we always point them back to the fact that they've succeeded as well. So follow that pathway.